So welcome back guys to We Talk Boxing, and today I'm going to be giving you guys my pre-fight thoughts regarding this up and coming weekend's matchup between Zhang versus Joyce, which is the rematch. Now as always guys, please subscribe and comment for more boxing related content and help us grow this channel even further. This weekend sees the rematch taking place between Joyce and Zhang 5 months after the epic first fight, which happened in April, and Zhang took the victory with a 6-round TKO stoppage over Joyce, and he caused a lot of damage and a big upset for most boxing fans, as most boxing fans potentially, at the time thought that Joyce was unstoppable, like a Terminator, just keeps coming forward as a fighter, was very durable, but Zhang upset that. And as I said, caused a big upset. Most people thought that Joyce would have took this fight to points, or potentially would have even stopped Zhang in the later rounds. Now, from my perspective, it was a good performance from Zhang. He kept Joyce at bay. He had a brilliant jab. I thought his jab was excellent, and his hooks, which was his best shot really. And Joyce done very well to last the 6 rounds. I thought realistically from round 4 onwards, anything from there, the fight potentially could have been stopped. And the referee pretty much kept Joyce in the fight. But Joe's Joe, you know what I mean? He's got that never say die attitude sort of thing, and he kept coming forward. And some people could argue and say that if the fight was allowed to carry on and maybe the latter rounds, Zhang potentially would have got tired and Joyce probably would have come back and maybe have upset the cards at that point. But I believe that if the fight would have carried on, it was only going one way. Obviously, Zhang could have took 1 or 2 rounds off, maybe recharge the batteries, and then potentially come back and just put more punishment on Joyce. But it was a good stoppage, and this is why we're here where we're at right now, and it allows for this rematch to take place. So my predictions for this fight is that I believe that Joyce will win this fight. I'm going to say potentially a late stoppage, maybe rounds 9 onwards, or potentially a Joyce victory on points. Now, my reasoning for this is that I do feel that Joyce has learnt from his mistakes. He now knows that he's not invincible and he can't use his face as a punching bag, and that he's going to potentially change the way he approaches this fight. I feel as if we're going to see more jabs from Joyce. I feel as if he's going to potentially try and keep Zhang away from him, stay away from that jab, use a little bit more head movement. And I do believe if he could utilize that head movement a little bit more, maybe a bit more movement, then he should potentially have just enough to maybe overcome a tough, strong Zhang. Zhang, from my point of view, doesn't really have to change much. All he has to do is go in there with the same game plan and see how Joyce handles it. But it's Joyce who has to make the adjustments in this fight. But as I said, if he comes in there, he uses his jab a lot more and moves his head a bit more, then potentially I do feel that he has the tools to potentially beat Zhang on point, or maybe even capture a latter stoppage, because he has got a good engine, Joyce, and he can bang a bit as well, and he likes to wear his opponents down. So I do feel that he's going to come quite strong in the latter part of the fight. But he has to set the standards quite early. He can't go in there and absorb a lot of punishment within the first 2-3 rounds. Otherwise, we could see a repeat. Now, from my perspective, I don't want to see a repeat because I feel that Joyce has a lot to offer the heavyweight division. I think there's some good fights out there for him, some big fights. I'd like to see him in there with the likes of Anthony Joshua, maybe even a Deontay Wilder, or maybe even a Usyk. These two fought in the amateurs, so it'd be good to kind of see how these guys could maybe put on a display as a professional. I wouldn't like to see him in there with someone like a Tyson Fury, because I feel as if Tyson Fury is just too big, too skilled for him. and I don't feel as if he would cause Tyson Fury too much problems really, because he's quite stiff and quite rigid, and Tyson Fury likes to just dance around when he's in the boxing ring, and I feel as if he would just punish Joyce. But as I said, there's some good fights for Joyce if he can come through this test. Now, if he does come through this test, I'm a firm believer that it's square. It's all square on the results. Both guys will have a win each against each other. So it's just rightly for them to do a trilogy. And I'd like to see that trilogy maybe early next year to see who is the better fighter of the two. But the likelihood of that is we won't see it. It would be a little bit like Anthony Joshua when he lost to Ruiz. Anthony Joshua had that rematch because he was the champion at the time, and he got knocked out in the first fight. And when he fought Ruiz the second time, he just used his boxing skills, kept him at bay, didn't really mix it with him, and obviously went out there and beat him so comprehensively. But anyhow, as I said, moving on, if he doesn't beat Zhang, then it's a long road back. He would have to potentially fight against all the lower opposition to try and build his rankings, build his reputation back again before he's ever going to have some sort of high-profile fights. Anyhow, Zhilei Zhang, on the other hand, again, he's in a no-win-win situation sort of thing, because if he wins, brilliant, you know what I mean, he's going to potentially have some bigger fights against the likes of, as I mentioned, Anthony Joshua, Usyk, Tyson Fury, and Deontay Wilder, etc., etc. But if he loses, considering his age, again, he could potentially be one of these fighters who have to fight against maybe some lesser opposition just to try and rebuild and try and get himself into contention again. However, he's still a fairly big name, and obviously with China behind him, he could potentially try and entice fighters to go over to China and to fight him. And it's big money fights over there. And again, he's a big name in China, so there's opportunities there for him. So I feel as if he's got more of an option if he loses to have still be in big contentious fights. But anyhow, I don't want to long this video out too much. As I said, my thoughts are that Joyce will win this rematch on Saturday night. I do feel that maybe a late stoppage or potentially points victory for Joyce if he could go in there and do what I mentioned earlier in the video. But anyhow, let me know your thoughts in the comments below. How do you feel that this fight's going to go ahead on Saturday night? Do you feel it's going to be repeat or revenge? Let me know in the comments below. As always, guys, please subscribe. Bless.